On behalf of Penn Sustainability, I would like to welcome everybody today to our Green Labs panel. My name is Natalie Walker, and I am the Sustainability Manager with Penn Sustainability. This event is part of the University of Pennsylvania's Climate Week, and it's also part of Penn Sustainability's Rethink Your Footprint campaign, where we welcome the Penn community to think deeply about their impact on and connection with the environment. So before beginning our panel today, we would like to acknowledge that the lands that the University of Pennsylvania occupies and from which I'm speaking to you today are the ancestral lands of the Lenni Lenape people, whose presence and resilience in Pennsylvania continues to this day. And I'd like to ask you to join me in honoring the original caretakers of this land and recognizing the histories of land theft, violence, erasure, and oppression that's brought our institution and ourselves here. So in terms of logistics for today, I will briefly introduce the Green Labs program, and then each of our panelists will speak for about 10 minutes about their experience with the program. Afterwards, we will have plenty of time for questions, so please type your questions into the chat box once they come up for you, and we'll ask those questions after we've heard from each of the panelists. This event is being recorded, and we ask that you please keep your audio muted throughout the duration of the presentation. Before we hear from today's three speakers, I'd like to explain why Penn Sustainability chose to have a Green Labs focused event during Climate Week, and give a brief background on Penn's Green Labs guide and commitment. While the large majority of Penn students, faculty, and staff continue to work and learn remotely at this time, labs are one of the few spaces where people are still physically present on campus. In speaking with our Green Labs Executive Committee, which helps steer the Green Labs program, we felt that speaking with researchers as they return to campus was a good approach so that we could educate people about the benefits of more sustainable lab practices as lab operations resume on campus. The Green Labs program is a voluntary lab sustainability program for any lab at Penn, and the guide splits actions into three categories: daily, monthly, and annual. Unlike Penn's Green Office program, Green Labs is not a point-based system with levels. Since offices are typically similar to one another, labs are often so different from one another and have different requirements based on the research taking place there. So you'll hear much more about this from our three panelists who come from a diverse group of labs on campus. So why focus on labs? Well, the top 10 most energy-intensive lab buildings on Penn's campus account for more than 25% of all building energy use. This high energy use can be mostly attributed to high air exchange requirements and energy-intensive equipment in labs. Additionally, labs are large producers of waste, and unlike office spaces, reuse and recycling is not always possible in labs, depending on the type of materials being used, especially when it comes to biohazardous waste. Because labs produce a large amount of waste, this makes them a natural target for waste reduction efforts in order to meet the goals outlined in Penn's Climate and Sustainability Action Plan. In order to participate in the program as a committed Green Lab, labs must submit a commitment form and a checklist with actions that their labs are taking to promote sustainability. There are two ways to submit this checklist and form, which can be found on our website. You can either print and scan the documentation, or you can complete the checklist and form using a digital Qualtrics form. Once you've submitted using either of these methods, you'll receive a commitment sticker and a framed certificate to display in your lab. We also ask that labs renew their commitment on a 3-year basis in case there is any staff turnover, a lab moves physical locations, or other circumstances arise. And we also see this as an opportunity for labs to contemplate and refresh sustainability practices in their labs. Here's just a snapshot of what the checklist looks like in our new and improved Green Labs guide, and it covers tips including energy conservation, water conservation, waste reduction, purchasing, and chemicals. We currently have 14 committed green labs, and here are all of the labs who have committed to the program so far. Finally, we'd just like to share a few Green Labs related resources that we think might be helpful to your lab. First, this is an advertising poster about chilling up your ultra-low temperature freezers. Chilling up to these temperatures can help you save energy and money on utility bills. Studies show that you won't harm your samples and this will help you extend the life of your freezer. More information on chilling up, including research from universities across the United States on chilling up various types of samples, can be found in the linked website by scanning the QR code in this graphic. Penn Sustainability also manages an ultra-low temperature freezer rebate program, which provides financial incentives for purchasing highly efficient freezers, as well as financial incentives for recycling old freezers. And you can learn more about the rebate amounts and eligible freezers on our website. And finally, we have lab recycling signage that explains the types of lab materials that can be recycled in Penn's normal single-stream recycling, which is collected using blue bins on campus. Please note that nothing out of the tissue culture labs can be recycled, and containers must be intact, and they must be triple rinsed, and the labels must be defaced. The signage is available for download on the Facilities and Real Estate Services website. We'll now hear from Penn staff who work in labs and have gone through the Green Labs commitment process. Our three speakers for today are Emily Kribis from the Perelman School of Medicine, Seville Manikurot from the School of Engineering, and Sarah Riddell from Penn Libraries. Our first speaker, Emily Kribis, is a fourth-year PhD candidate in microbiology department. She works for the APT lab, which investigates interactions between the microbiome and the immune system in the context of infectious disease. In the APT lab, Emily studies post-epithelial defenses against an intestinal pathogen. Her lab was Green Lab certified about a year ago, and she currently serves on the Green Labs Executive Committee. She also serves on the board of the Penn Society for Psychedelic Sciences and is highly involved in Fontaine Society and restorative practices at Penn. Emily, thanks so much for being here with us today, and I'll let you take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for that introduction. So here's just a snapshot of our website so you get an idea. I'm very grateful to be here, and I'm super excited to speak to you today on our efforts as a wet lab, specifically in Perelman, to increase sustainability practices at Penn. So here's our latest picture with some updates in the lab. This is from last summer. As you can see, we're pretty small. We're still about 5 people. So we had our tech actually graduate to IGG and a summer student that left. So we just got started in January of 2018, and we're located on the 3rd floor of Johnson Pavilion in the Department of Microbiology, where a lot of the infectious disease research happens. So we got certified, as Natalie said, about a year ago. This week, actually, I checked, it was September 27th, so super exciting. Since then, I've been heading a majority of the lab sustainability efforts with strong support from my PI, who has helped implement a lot of the ideas indicated in the Green Lab guide that I'll go over a bit. The experience overall has been very humbling, and since then, I've learned so much since then. So here are some things that we've started implementing successfully in the lab. So we're largely an immunology lab, which means that most of our experiments are either in mammalian cells or in mice. So a lot of what we do includes dissections, immune cell isolation, and flow cytometry. So we really don't produce, for example, a lot of hazardous waste. A lot of our waste comes from plastic. Through Green Lab, some things we've started doing are reusing these pipette tip racks through USA Scientific, participating in the Reusable Sharps program by Curtis Bay, as you can see here, and turning off lights daily when the last person leaves lab. So these procedures are pretty easy to implement, but have definitely saved us money, especially the reusable sharps program, while reducing our lab's plastic consumption and carbon emissions. I've also, as part of Green Labs, participated in several of the monthly meetings. Through these, as of recently catered meetings, thanks Eli, I've learned so much about specific actions that we can take as a lab and as individuals to reduce our footprint. And this ranges in levels of effort. As a grad student, I really appreciated this because it allowed for different levels of engagement, where if I couldn't commit as much time or energy to, for example, start a reusable Petri dish program, I could still commit to other types of low-hanging fruit. So an example of this is collecting used books, batteries, pens, and Corning products through their free mail-in recycling program in the lab and depositing it in many recycling centers, which you can find on the Green Labs website. There's actually one right in the clinical research building right next door. So we've also just had our annual defrost this past week. That was super easy to do, and it's a great and easy way to maintain efficiency of your freezers so they last several years longer. With all the recent and at the same time all too familiar events in this country and an understanding of our impact on society as labs, both positive and negative, our lab has had several discussions surrounding our role at Penn and society more broadly. We came up with a mission statement that accurately reflects these values, and although this is not a sign of direct action, we do believe that bringing these topics to light is a critical first step towards long-term sustainable action. As researchers, we play a critical role in fostering the health of a society, and resource consumption is an inevitable cost we have to pay for that. However, we do have agency over how these resources are managed by us, and it's critical that we take some time to reflect on how we can do better. As I start to wrap up a little bit, I did want to give a shout out, as I mentioned, to the Green Labs Executive Committee. Through the monthly Green Labs meetings, I was able to learn about the -70 initiative that was mentioned earlier, and that other schools, for example, at Boulder, have successfully implemented. It was through that knowledge that I felt compelled to be a part of the executive committee. Trying to get this implemented in my department, however, has been a challenge, and I think it's worth discussing a bit. This is the microbiology department, so right downstairs, a lot of the coronavirus research is going on. So there's plenty of other priorities that have taken over during this time, but we've been working on a way to attract other labs towards these opportunities. For example, by developing an annual or semesterly freezer challenge. Moreover, I think just because this -80C idea has been so ingrained in all of the wet labs and research labs that we've all been a part of, doesn't mean we shouldn't challenge it, especially if there's no evidence indicating a difference. To this end, I have been currently gathering questions from my own advisor and other faculty members that could be addressed by us in a microbiology monthly meeting and can be addressed with the actual science. So I encourage all of you, especially if you're grad students and researchers, to really join in and be involved in these efforts, since we can directly affect this change. So here are some personal takeaways I definitely want to keep improving upon and become more involved, but there's definitely a lot of things that come with this work that is humbling, at least for me. And some of the things that I've learned is that this work requires a lot of patience, especially with the, chilling up freezers. That's going to take a lot of time, a lot of discussion, and, addressing stigma is never easy. Same for perseverance and optimism. In terms of actually enacting behavior changes by others, I've really found that the best way to do that is to engage with people directly and give a clear path and clear actions that drive a positive vision for the future, and to just keep it as specific as possible. Anyone, including and especially us researchers, can play a role in fighting for climate justice, and this is just one way to do it. Again, especially given our carbon footprint here at Penn. And small sustained changes shouldn't be underestimated. I feel that way personally about what I've done. And I think if you're able to continue engaging with that and continue connecting and engaging with others, that goes a very long way. And finally, our effort at Penn is really bigger than just Green Labs. Of course, that's where we spend a lot of our time and where we get paid. But I highly encourage you to attend or check out all the other events that have been going on this week, including the Carceral State and Climate Justice, to understand more about Penn's role and affiliation with fossil fuel companies, for example. So I hope that you found some of this helpful, and I am very thankful for your time and attention. Please contact me with any questions or comments you have on this topic or sustainability in general, as it really has become a really important topic to me personally, especially in this past year. So thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Emily, for explaining some of the measures you've implemented in your lab, how you've incorporated the intent of Green Labs and inclusion into your mission statement, and how you continue to build a case for some more challenging actions as well. Really interesting. So thank you. I do want to remind people to put any questions that you have for our speakers in the chat. We will take questions at the end of our session. So as questions come up, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll address them at the end. So our next speaker is Sevil Manikorot. Sevil is the director of the George H. Stevenson Foundation Education Laboratory and Biomarker Space in Penn's Engineering Department of Bioengineering. Sevil is also a Penn Engineering alumnus and received undergraduate and graduate degrees from Penn. The Biomarker Space combines bioengineering's educational lab space with an open makerspace, encouraging a free flow of ideas, creativity, and entrepreneurship between bioengineering students and students throughout Penn. This interdisciplinary lab is designed for work involving testing and prototyping of biomolecular, chemical, electrical, and materials and mechanical engineering. While the lab has scheduled classes, it's open to all Penn students to work on their own projects. So with that, I will pass it on to Sevil.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you, folks, for coming. So yeah, my name is Sevil, and I'm, can you go to the next slide? And I manage the Stevenson Foundation Educational Laboratory and Biomaker Space, and we are a part of Penn Engineering. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what is our lab? So we're a little different than a lot of other educational labs like chemistry or something like that, while our primary mission is for educating bioengineers, we're also an open makerspace, and we encourage a lot of collaborations between our students and just people throughout campus. Bioengineering is broad. We apply all engineering to biology, and so we deal with biology, chemistry, materials, mechanical, electrical, all that kind of stuff. Next slide, please. Oh, I think did we miss one? Thank you. We are open to all students. We have roughly 1,000 students in our classes registered every year. Plus, we also have other kind of random Penn students using our lab space because we're open. In fact, both of the 2019 PIP winners last year launched from our lab, PIP being the President's Innovation Prize. We are the only open makerspace at Penn until Kangen Hall opens in January, but we'll still be the only ones in, I guess, the east side of campus. There are only a handful of biomaker spaces in the world, so if you were to Google biomaker space, you'd find us and this upstart tech school, which you might have heard of, called MIT, but we try not to think about them too much. Next slide, please. And we have a video just to give you a quick overview. Hopefully it'll work.
Imagine a space where the classroom can be an innovation playground, where there is no separation between professor and student and everyone is encouraged to learn. Imagine a space where the classroom is the real world and you have the tools to create, where anyone can walk in and work on an idea. Imagine a place where setbacks and failed prototypes are just another opportunity to push your invention further. A place that is open to anyone. A place that encourages diversity in background, knowledge, and major. Because engineering is fundamentally interdisciplinary. Imagine a place where the only restriction is your creativity. Imagine the Stevenson Foundation Biomaker space.
Thank you. Effectively, we're trying to emphasize that it is incredibly interdisciplinary. And because we have a large user population, we produce a lot of waste. We have, and one thing that's interesting is many of you will realize is that labs are not laid out for waste containers, which is just interesting. So consequently, we never really had many. And one thing I observed were that people were generally not willing to walk that far to, recycle something. And if they can't immediately see the container, they just kind of throw it in the trash. People also don't read signage. And so these are kind of the things that were coming to our mind when I think we got an email about Green Labs, and I started looking at all the different suggestions and stuff, and we started exploring how we can go a little further. Next slide, please. So I wanted to focus a bit on our waste streams. So one thing we do, because we do a broad range of stuff, is that we color code waste. So light gray is very specifically for regular trash. Blue is for recycling, which in engineering, unfortunately, not all of our, if you walk to the building, not all the containers that are meant for recycling are blue. But we're very strict with that. Black is used for electronic waste, and red, of course, for biologics. And it's distributed throughout the lab, so you don't have to walk that far. Everybody can see where these are, and I think that's actually helped a lot. Next slide, thank you. And we also do some obvious things, such as putting the waste container next to the device, which, I guess it's things that you don't necessarily think about, but it's been incredibly helpful. That was one of the things that we also did. Next slide, please. We also train all of our users. All of our students that are registered for classes have to take a quiz. There's signed compliance forms for any of these kind of random people that walk in. And we're also staffed, which helps with compliance. I'm very picky. I will harass people if I see someone trying to throw something in a trash can. I do it in a nice way, but it just drives me nuts. But I think that helps a lot. Next slide, please. Thank you. And we do have student lab staff. Our theme color happens to be green, which happens to fit well with Green Labs. But we do a lot of extensive training for our student employees. I found that they want to be excited by sustainability, and it helps that they see that I'm excited by it, so they are, encouraged by that. I think without that incentive, they tend to be not as forthcoming. We have lots of just kind of standard operational procedures, so they will turn off the lights, make sure all equipment is turned off and things of that nature when leaving for the day. And we just other things that we do is for orders, rather than do a random $10 order here, $10 order there, we consolidate everything so that way it's we don't have to place so many frequent orders and get so much packaging. We try to do orders maybe once or twice a week. And yeah, so similar to Emily's lab, please follow us online. We're on Facebook, Instagram, something else on Twitter. And because everyone is online, our students are online, which is very sad. We also created a Slack page if anyone's interested. But thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you so much, Seville, for educating us about the Biomaker space and the training and waste categorization and locations that help make sustainability easier for people in the labs. So last but not least, we'll hear from Sarah Riddell. Sarah is the Margie E. Meyerson Head of Conservation at the Penn Libraries, where she leads and manages the Stephen Miller Conservation Laboratory. Sarah created and co-leads an Ivy Plus Conservation Alliance for conservation programs at 13 major research universities and the informal CLAMP, Conservators at the Library and Museum at Penn, which fosters cross-campus information sharing and collaboration. Sarah's lab, the Stephen Miller Conservation Laboratory, was established in 2016, is responsible for long-term protection and stability of the library's impressive special collections, and was an early partner of the Green Labs initiative. Sarah will speak with you in much more detail about the work on the lab that she does, and I'll leave it to Sarah to take it away.
Great, thank you. We're really proud to be here today. Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you all for, I don't know how I can follow up Seville's video, but we're really happy to be part of this, and I know that we're kind of an outlier, but I hope you'll have fun as you learn more about our program. So as you said, we were established in 2016. We're located on the 5th floor of the Van Pelt Dietrich Library Center. And our conservation department is a staff of 5, highly skilled and specialized conservators and technicians. And we're extremely proud that Liz McDermott is one of the representatives on the library, from the library to Penn Sustainability Committee. Our facility is the first conservation lab in the history of Penn Libraries and is equipped with specialized tools and equipment to stabilize fragile collection items like books, manuscripts, parchments, and other objects. Conservation encompasses all of the actions taken toward the long-term preservation of cultural heritage, and we are by nature cautious and think of how our work will impact objects in these collections over centuries, not just years and decades. Our commitment to serving the Penn Libraries follows the ethical guidelines of the American Institute for Conservation, and we're part of a growing movement within conservation to approach our work with a sustainability mindset. When we joined the Green Labs commitment, we immediately sought simple and effective ways to green our practice. Among those mentioned, having sharps containers, shutting our fume hood, turning off lights, and other university guidelines for safe lab practices. Our biggest hurdle is single-stream recycling in plastics. We make every effort to reduce our consumption of household plastics, and we religiously separate them according to recycling code, and we have homemade labels and containers to gather specialty plastics until we can volunteer and take them to a local grocery store or other drop-off location. But unfortunately, as many of you know, this process is in crisis because grocery stores like Mom's Organics in West Philly are no longer accepting number 4 plastics, which are sheeted plastics and films. Liz is pursuing options to send them through the Campus Waste Management mail-in program, and I'm eager to know from others on this panel or in the audience now or later what solutions they have found for recycling in their facilities. By far, the most common specialty plastics in our work are PET and PETG. They're optically clear, colorless thermoplastic polyesters. So I'll share the chemical structure for each instead of showing you something that you can't see. But like a good librarian, I'll point you towards the citation for the diagrams and chemical structures here in the citation at the bottom of the screen. PET is polyethylene terephthalate, and it's more commonly known in our world as Mylar. And we buy it in wide rolls, 60-inch rolls, and a variety of thicknesses. And we use a heat edge welder to form L-shaped sleeves and other archival enclosures. And I know that there are a number of archives and library staff here on the call, and so they are very familiar with those LCs. PETG, sold as Vivec, is a glycol modified PET, and it's sold as sheeted plastics in a variety of thicknesses. And the modification there creates a new plastic that can be cold formed with a sheet metal press and bent into a variety of shapes and die cut. We use it for fabricating exhibit cradles, which we're going to highlight here today. But as an aside, this spring we were proud to contribute our thinnest Vivec stock and joined our colleague Varva Contuzzi, who's head of digital media and virtual services at the Biomed Library on the Penn Health Tech Initiative to create face mask PPE. So we know that PET is technically recyclable, as is Vivec, and manufacturers claim it's recyclable, but we've had issues and we had to seek other solutions. And so rather than not using it, which was fundamentally not going to be possible for our exhibit workflows, we looked towards ways of being effective in our use of Vivec. And by far, that's in support of our exhibits across Penn libraries, where in a year we will often prepare 800 or more individual items for display in exhibit spaces across the libraries. Books on display, in particular, for long durations of several months, require support that is shaped to the unique profile of a selected page opening. Vivec is perfect then for this because it can be shaped without heat or noxious solvents. Aesthetically, it doesn't visually block the audience from viewing the materials and the covers and other important features like other materials might. In principle, our first early Vivec designs were reusable, but in practice, we found that it was too difficult to match the really unique XYZ axis of an individual item, and that's a measurement relative to the deck of an exhibit case, which is dependent on the exhibit designer and other curatorial decisions. So the process of matching and organizing our first wave of Vivec cradles was too labor intensive, and the design wasn't adaptable enough to a wide variety of materials in our collection. So what to do? Well, we asked our friends. So in 2018, Penn hosted the kickoff meeting for the Ivy Plus Conservation Group, which gathered conservation leaders from labs across our peer institutions who might lead programs in libraries, museums, and galleries. And from that came a workshop in 2019 led by Johns Hopkins University's senior book conservator and incredibly creative conservator, Alessandro Scola. And this was just the catalyst that we needed for our program. Alessandro's design is a modular two-part book cradle that fits a front foot here in blue and an M-shaped cradle in green, and it's at a low angle and is assembled by discrete post screws instead of sticky tape. Liz attended the workshop and came back buzzing with ideas on how we could adapt his design to meet the needs of our exhibit spaces and workflows. At the time, we had issues about the variety of angles that we needed for our exhibits based on design and curatorial choice, like I said, and we just had such a large operation that we couldn't hand punch those screw holes. And we had a wonderful exhibit in 2019 that of medieval and Renaissance manuscripts that required almost 100 custom cradles. And this was just the perfect opportunity for us to introduce a new design and workflow. I saw it as an investment in a longer term sustainable practice that would align us with our commitment by reducing our overall lifetime plastic consumption. I hope you agree about that. I feel a little nervous saying that in this group, but we used a lot of plastic, but it means we won't use as much plastic later. But seen here are some of the results, and I'm going to walk you through the process that Liz developed. So she came up with a brilliant idea to experiment with laser cutting the pieces and those screw post holes. She created new vector graphics in Adobe Illustrator and contacted Dennis Piratini, manager of the Weissman School of Design's Fabrication Lab, to integrate those designs into his laser cutting equipment and workflows. Dennis generously donated his time and creativity as he and Liz experimented with the design specifications for laser cutting. You can see that the geometry changes in a beautiful way as the pieces get larger in the accumulation there at the top right. We adapted complex spreadsheets with hundreds of book measurements into cradle calculators and project management tools. We're very proud of our Excel spreadsheets to identify, what sizes at scale we needed for our needs now and into the future. We wouldn't have been able to cut the interior angles on those larger pieces with the equipment in our lab, and we owe a debt to many student workers and other colleagues who helped move the project to completion. Ultimately, the cradle design successfully meets our needs. But word of warning to any eager design school students who might be on this call, the edges can become scorched and Vivec may not officially be approved for use in the Fab Lab. All good things must come to an end, and when exhibits are deinstalled, the cradles need to be disassembled and stored for future use. Quick and efficient organization is key, and Liz skillfully and adeptly found a cabinet on Ben's attic, the intra-campus upcycling warehouse, which is a fantastic resource if you don't know about it. And all of the components are now organized systematically by size and angle using a customized measurement guide. It's a tight fit, but all of our cradles can fit inside of the cabinet, away from dust and safe until we need them again. I'll leave you with this celebratory photo of the Hopkins and Penn conservation staff who reconvened at the Fab Lab that last week in March before everything shut down. And I hope you learned about our innovative program and our unique practices and our unique combination of artistry, design, science, math, fabrication, and project management as we care for Penn Library's collections. I've included our contact information if you're interested in learning more about the lab from me or about the process from Liz, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sarah, for educating us about your lab and explaining how you addressed challenges in your lab that you came across by collaborating with your peers to effectively utilize materials. It's really interesting. So now we'll take some questions from the audience. Please type any questions that you have into the chat. And we also welcome you to connect with all of us after the conversation today if you have any questions that come up later. So the next slide will have some information about how to connect with each of us. And you can contact Penn Sustainability at sustainability@upenn.edu. So if anyone has any questions, please go ahead and type those into the chat now. So I think we'll start with a question that we have from Penn Sustainability, and this could be for any of our panelists. What changes, if any, have you had to make in your labs due to COVID, and how has this impacted the sustainability of your operations?
I can answer quickly, if that's okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Our lab is working remotely as the libraries introduce phased library service. They're focusing all energies on pickup and delivery options to facilitate teaching and faculty and student research. So we are not on campus. I'm here temporarily for a project.
Emily, you want to answer that?
Yeah, just really quickly. So as I said, we have a lot of mice. That's what all our experiments are in. So we've really had to downsize on all our colonies, euthanize a bunch of mice, and that's also for the ULAR staff to reduce their load. So we've just had generally a lot less animal experiments, which really consume a lot because we work with an infectious pathogen. So like a lot of like extra paper towels, like bleach, like has been dramatically reduced.
Great, thank you. Seville, is there anything you'd like to contribute to that?
We're
apply?
not open to students now, unfortunately, so it's not really an issue for us.
Probably fewer materials being used across the labs as they're not open at this time. Okay, we have another question. Were any of your lab members and mentors resistant to joining Green Labs? And if so, how do you deal with this?
We were all on board. We were really excited to be a part of it. It seemed like a no-brainer for us.
Good to hear. I saw some other head shakes. Sounds like people didn't have much resistance.
Yeah, same. I think it's easy to be like, yeah, let's do it. I think the harder part is actually like implementation, and that's like really required like individual conversations on the side of like, oh, remember, like we're turning off the lights every day or turning off the equipment every day. But besides that, yeah, no resistance.
Yeah, Emily, can you tell us more about those reminders? How have you um, kept people in the loop, and how frequently do you remind people, or is it just kind of as things come up? Curious to learn more about that.
Yeah, so it's usually as things come up, if I see that, consistently, like when I come in, the lights are on or I'm the first person, then I'll just remind everyone. I also like whenever there's updates to the Green Lab guide, I like to ask for 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning of each lab meeting to just like I usually put a few slides together and be like, oh, these are the new developments and this is how we can work together and let's schedule a defrost for this next week. So yeah, just reminders like that.
I think that's a really good piece of advice for others who might be interested in pursuing green labs in the future, to have those periodic reminders. And I'm curious if others of you on the panel might have other advice for people as they look into becoming a committed green lab.
I think for me, it was just buy-in for our student employees and getting them on board. Fortunately, just like everyone else, they were excited to be involved. In fact, I think the idea of putting in the context of sustainability got them more excited to follow other procedures that we had. So that actually worked out well.
Great.
I can share.
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Sorry. Um, within the lab, lots of buy-in, our peers, lots of buy-in and support. Functionally, one of the biggest hurdles we have as a building, it's a 200,000 square foot facility with, I can't tell you how many dual recycling and waste containers distributed throughout the library. And it's the facility housekeeping component of having to deal with contaminated recycling bags, students eating in the library, throwing it out in the wrong bin, not having consistent signage, things like that means that the building's recycling can often just go into the garbage. And it's, a practice that is just, it's hard to come up against. And especially now that, housekeeping and facility staff are part of frontline responders, and they were stretched thin before in terms of staffing and resources, and they're even more stretched now. So I think it's a hurdle, and I think it's a programmatic, broader conversation that if there's a campus university-wide aspect to that would be really compelling for administrators.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, and that's a challenge in a university setting where there are so many people turning over all the time. So that's something that we talk about a lot within our climate and sustainability action plan. Always could use some support in that area. So that's great. And I think when schools and centers are able to reinforce that, that's really great too. So that's one of the reasons I think Civil, it's really great that you use the coloring that is consistent for campus and kind of reinforce that even when there are other places within your school that are may not be able to do that. So that's wonderful.
Natalie?
Yes.
So it's Ann Papa George. So I was just thinking along the same lines, and I'm wondering if it might be good to give this presentation to all of the building administrators. We have a BA forum, and if they can see how some of the schools have actually done this and implemented this, maybe we can get more buy-in. I know we did it for the lab, for the Vice Provost for Research Lab members, but they're still at a higher level. I mean, these are the people that are actually responsible for implementing within each of the schools. So that might be an idea to see if we can get more buy-in.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. People who are actually on the ground, working with us every day. Okay, and this might be a better question for folks on the Green Labs Executive Committee who are on the call. But we had a question which was, what sort of commitment do you suggest for a Green Labs rep? Somebody is hoping to start a program at their institution in the coming months. I think either if one of our panelists wants to answer that, that'd be great, or if there's somebody from the Green Labs Executive Committee on the call that might want to answer that, that'd be great too.
I can start to speak on this. So if we're talking about like being on the committee here, that really just requires monthly meetings. And personally, I think a lot of these actions, once implemented, only need to be checked in on periodically. I think it's really like a range on the spectrum of like how involved you want to be in. Like personally, I spend like 1 or 2 hours, maybe less per week. But I think it really depends on your level of involvement.
Great. Okay. So another question that we have, the Image Permanence Institute has done some research on sustainability for HVAC in libraries and museums. Are there similar initiatives in other kinds of lab settings? So has anyone on the panel done any of that kind of work for looking at HVAC equipment?
Well, that's a question that's coming from inside my house. Andy Hart is Director of Preservation here at the libraries, but I think it's interesting to know that the historic preservation program at the design school looks at building envelopes, and the HVAC units and airflow is a really key component of the preservation of buildings and built structures. And they have some really interesting things going on now. That's that overlap of conservation as a profession and sustainability, because the intensity of HVAC requirements on a ideal level are at odds with a green outlook. And so there's really interesting things happening there. And it could be a great point of future work to bring in that component, the historic preservation folks, into the sustainability conversation.
Absolutely, and I think a similar conversation is happening right now around as we think about COVID impacts and more, thinking about more air changes in buildings, and how do we balance that with sustainability and energy usage. It's a really interesting conversation. Okay, are there other questions?
I have a kind of question that's coming from the chat, something I saw. Lynn Grant, who is conservator over at Penn Museum, mentioned that their practice of using towels, cloth towels, rather than paper towels, now in the COVID situation had to be discontinued. And I know that when we return, we're going to have to address this similar kinds of things. And I'm wondering what folks think about that, if they have other solutions, or if it's something that we could table and then look at as a group.
I think that's absolutely something to address as a group. There obviously are more trade-offs that are coming to the table as we think about COVID. I'm curious to hear from others before I jump in, but is this something that others are thinking about? I know we've got a number of different labs on the call, so feel free to unmute yourself and answer that question as well. Well, I think it's a good thing to table and talk about. I think similar conversations are happening, we know, in the dining space around reusable containers. And so I think it'd be a really interesting conversation to have together.
I saw Lynn also mention something about nitrile glove recycling. And I don't know what the status currently is because of COVID. But previously in our lab, we implemented a program that Kimberly-Clark offers where you can collect your nitrile gloves and then send them back. And Kimberly-Clark will recycle those. I'm not sure if there's a fee associated with that, but that's what we did. But now that labs are having to deal with the COVID virus and stopping the spread, I'm not sure if that program has been put on hold or not. And it'd be good to kind of find out, I think.
Yeah, that program has been put on hold, and I think it's no longer allowed. Glove recycling is no longer allowed on Penn's campus. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's something for people to know, that there has been a change in that policy. And feel free as well for people, if there's something that I missed in the chat, if you want to unmute yourself and ask questions, we're open for that now.
Seville asked a question about number 4, plastic films, and what people are doing about those now, because most grocery stores aren't accepting them. And I've been doing a little bit of research to look at mail-in programs. But again, I haven't reached out to any companies because I'm afraid that because of COVID that they may have all been put on hold because they don't want to accept contaminated plastic film. But Waste Management, their website does have a program where you can mail in for a fee. I think it's something like $180 and they send you a big, huge box that you then fill with number 4 plastics and can mail them in. But I have not looked into that much further than, looking at the information they have on their website.
Yeah, great question. I'd love to hear what others are doing for those plastic bags and other flexible packaging.
There's an answer.
Yeah, there's one in the chat. TerraCycle and G2 Revolution do plastic bag and film recycling for a fee.
I think the nice thing about the grocery store drop-offs, though, was that they were free. And so it does seem kind of painful to have to pay to give someone else your material to turn it into something new. Definitely something. Sorry.
Did they stop doing that somewhere? Because they still do it at CVS on Walnut, right by campus.
Oh,
I just dropped some off, and also I have given a bunch to a ceramicist to use as packaging. Can you hear me? Okay.
We can.
I know there's also some folks in the area who use plastic bags to make like weatherproof blankets, I guess, for folks experiencing homelessness. Those are, obviously like very niche places that you could repurpose the plastic bags, and it's, obviously better if we can have something that's a more longer term and more sustainable practice to repurpose or recycle them. But that's definitely something that we can further research, given the fact that a lot of those stores that normally collect them are no longer doing that.
That's interesting that CVS, when I was turned away when I tried to drop off our plastic film at CVS, so it's interesting that, to hear that they are accepting plastic.
Just the one on Walnut, not any CVS.
Yeah, I went to the one on Walnut is right across from the library.
When did you go?
Between 34th and 35th.
Oh.
Yeah, so we were turned away there. I don't know if our bag looked too big or what, but
But doesn't Lowe's still do it?
We haven't tried Lowe's. I'm not sure.
So
Yeah, so maybe.
there's so many practical things coming and going, and I know that Seville said that he has a Slack channel. Is there something similar that Green Labs or Sustainability Committee has that, you know, I need a thing, I have a thing, I found that they're accepting drop-offs here. Is there something like that that folks could be a part of or learn from?
There is. So as part of the Green Labs working group, Eli has a listserv, and so you can see kind of the middle resource on the page that's showing right now. Eli, if you email Eli, she can get you looped in as part of that listserv.
Thank you.
We exchange a lot of stuff on there, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe if people have equipment that they don't need any longer, a lot of those conversations happen there. It's a great resource.
And
thank you, Eli.
Yeah, no problem. And the executive committee just was talking about this Seeding Labs program in case we can't do it within campus. We could mail it somewhere. But if you're just talking your own stuff, I use there's a Buy Nothing Facebook group for my neighborhood that I use a lot. Especially if it's not something that's good for like a thrift store. Like I've done like just like weird stuff, like my collection of rubber bands that I didn't have a use for, but I collected them from my produce. Somebody like wanted them.
That's great. It's amazing
Yeah.
the things that you can exchange on those kinds of platforms that people want.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I think we've had some really interesting discussions today, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. And I just want to say thank you so much for all of you for being here today and really participating in the conversation. And I want to say a special thank you to our speakers, Emily, Seville, and Sarah, for being early adopters of the Green Labs program and volunteering your time today to speak about your experiences. I also want to thank Elizabeth Main from Penn Sustainability for supporting and organizing and logistics for this event. The Green Labs Executive Committee for all of your support in driving these programs forward, and Provost Wendell Pritchett's office for supporting Climate Week and this event, and also Simon Richter for his efforts in organizing Climate Week and inspiring events like these throughout campus. So just as a reminder, this event, it was recorded, and the resources as well as a recording of this event will be posted on Penn Sustainability's website. So be on the lookout for that. And otherwise, please stay in touch and reach out to us using the contact information on this screen. And thank you all again for joining us today. We hope to see you at some of the other Climate Week events throughout the week.